we're going to be exploring the world of photography collecting. It's way more interesting than it might seem at first, you know? It's not just about liking pretty pictures. We're talking about owning actual pieces of history, art, maybe even making a bit of money on the side.
Right, it's like a whole other side to photography that most people don't think about.
I've got a stack of articles in this photography collecting guide right here that we're going to dig into today. So what do you think? Ready to become expert photo collectors?
Let's do it. I've always been curious about this world. What makes it so fascinating?
Well, for me, it's the idea that you're not just owning a picture, but you're owning a moment in time, a piece of history. And this guide really digs into that, talking about how people collect these photographs for all sorts of reasons, from personal enjoyment to like serious financial investments.
Yeah, what always gets me is the historical aspect. I mean, imagine owning a photo from the very beginning of photography. It'd be like holding a piece of that era in your hand.
Totally. Actually, the guide talks about these things called daguerreotypes, which were those early photographs made on, get this, silver-plated copper. Owning one is like having a direct connection to that time period, like stepping back in history, makes you appreciate how far we've come.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of history, another super interesting thing the guide highlights is this idea of provenance.
Provenance? That sounds fancy. What's that all about?
So basically, provenance is like the history of ownership for a photograph. Just like a painting, you know, if it was owned by someone famous or important, its value can skyrocket.
Okay, so like if I had a photo taken by Ansel Adams himself, that would be worth a fortune.
Potentially, yeah. Because it has that direct connection to a renowned photographer, its value increases.
Yeah.
It's not just a pretty picture anymore, it's a piece of art history.
I never realized how much who owned a photo before could affect its value. It's like adding another layer to the story, right?
Exactly. And stories are a huge part of what makes a photograph valuable in the first place. This guide dives into all the factors that contribute to a photo's worth, and it gets really interesting. One thing they compare is limited edition photographs to rare records.
Okay, interesting analogy. I'm listening.
So just like with vinyl, right?
Yeah.
The fewer copies that exist, the more valuable it becomes. Same goes for photographs. Limited edition prints are like gold to collectors.
Supply and demand makes sense. It's kind of like how a rare baseball card is worth more than just a regular one, right?
Exactly. Rarity is a huge factor, but it's not just about how many prints are out there, you know? The guide also talks about the condition of a photo being crazy important.
A beat-up old print probably isn't going to fetch top dollar.
Right. A pristine print that's been well taken care of. That's what collectors dream about. It's like finding a time capsule, a window into the past. It's like owning a piece of history, a piece of that story.
It really makes you think about all the photos being taken today, right? Like, what with everyone and their phones snapping pics constantly, makes you wonder how digital photography plays into all of this.
That's a great question. And yeah, the guide actually gets into this whole evolving landscape of photography.
So is there even a market for digital photos in the collecting world? I mean, it's not like they're printed on fancy silver plates or anything.
Well, traditional prints, those are definitely still king. You know, they have that timeless appeal. But digital is definitely shaking things up.
How so? I'm curious.
The guide talks about these online platforms and digital-only galleries that are popping up. It's made it so much easier for people to discover new photographers and even buy prints.
So, like, instead of flying to some fancy auction house in Europe, I can browse potential purchases from my couch.
Exactly. And even auctions themselves, a lot of them are moving online now.
So we've got these traditional prints, online platforms making things more accessible, but what about buying digital photos themselves? Is that even a thing people do?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting. The guide mentions this whole world of digital-only photography collecting, and a big part of that is NFTs.
NFTs and photography. Okay, gotta admit, I'm not totally sure I get what that even means.
It's a whole new frontier.
Yeah.
So basically, an NFT, or non-fungible token, it's like a digital certificate of ownership for a digital asset, like a photo in this case.
Okay, so instead of owning the physical photo, you own the digital file.
Exactly. It's verified through blockchain technology, so you know it's the real deal. Owning an NFT photo could get you into these exclusive online communities, events with a photographer, maybe even a say in how the image is used.
Wow, that's wild. It's like the photo comes with its own online world. So we've got traditional prints, digital platforms changing the game, and NFTs adding a whole other layer. So much to think about. For someone listening who's like, okay, I'm into this, what's a good first step to actually start a photo collection?
Start with what you love. Don't just buy something because you think it'll be worth money down the line. Find a genre, a photographer, a time period that really speaks to you.
Find your niche, right?
Yeah. Like, do you love vintage street photography? Haunting landscape? Find that thing that grabs you and go from there.
I love that. Find your passion and follow it makes total sense. And speaking of passion, this deep dive into the photography collecting guide has been so eye-opening. Any final thoughts for our listeners who might be feeling inspired to start their own collecting journeys?
You know, photo collecting, it's this amazing blend of art, history, and even potential investment. But at its heart, it's about connecting with images that resonate with you, that tell a story you want to be a part of. Don't be afraid to dive in, check out different photographers and styles, and most importantly, let your passion be your guide.